All right, my name's Connor Murray. I've been in enterprise software sales for 7 years now at a Fortune 50 company where I started as an SDR and worked my way up to the enterprise account executive role and spent 2 of those years as an SDR manager coaching thousands of reps how to transform their cold calling ability using the exact framework I'll be covering in this video today. So this is going to be a beast of a cold call video where we're going to start with, does cold calling even work? I see a lot of skepticism out there whether cold calling is even worth it. Yes, it is. We'll cover that. 2, how to overcome the fear and overall anxiety of cold calling. 3, honing in your tonality and confidence, which is over 90% of your success on cold calls. 4, how to build lists efficiently before you ever pick up the phone so that you can make calls more effectively and scale up your call volume through a process I call coiling the spring. We're going to cover the value statement framework. This is the cold call framework that I've seen transform many reps' ability and certainly transformed mine. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, cold call openers, scripts, how you can create your own, optimizing your process so you can go from making $30 a day to $100 a day without working more, and then objection handling techniques as well. So let's get into it. But first, exciting announcement for a cold call course community I launched with higher levels. I get a ton of requests for coaching and I put everything I know in my brain here. I've gone more in depth than I ever have on the techniques taught in this video, on my channel in general, where you can get live feedback and live coaching. It's all included as part of the community. So check out the links in the pinned comment below in the description. Hope to see you in there. But with that, let's get into the actual video. So, all right, let me get my head out of the way here. So first, I want to get you bought into cold calling because I'm sure a lot of you are, but I'm sure there's a lot of you on the fence. And the short answer is yes, it works better than ever, just probably not with the techniques and the way you've probably been taught following common sales enablement training or following sales gurus on the internet. So things like crazy permission-based openers, pattern interrupts, humor. Hey, this is a cold call. You're going to hate me. Do you have 27 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? Leading off with a series of open-ended questions before giving the prospect proper context for your call. You just interrupted someone's day. You've barely told them the purpose of your call, and you're just going to ask them a series of questions survey style. Yeah, that's not going to be received very well by most people. And essentially being trained to run discovery calls on cold calls without taking into account what I just shared, the nuances that you've generally just interrupted a busy prospect's day. They probably have a meeting coming up within the next 2 minutes, and they don't have time for you to ask a series of directional open-ended questions unless you tell them the purpose of your call. So cold calling is more effective than ever with the proper framework in place, and that's the value statement framework I'll be covering later in the video, where you use a repeatable structure where you don't need to overthink between every cold call. No pulling up LinkedIn and doing 5 minutes of research in between every call. It's a repeatable structure. Properly organizing your contact list before even worrying about picking up the phone. A lot of cold call success comes before you actually ever press dial, and it's the way you structure yourself, you organize yourself, your lists, so that you have things physically ready to do. You have large lists created for yourself, and you can just go with that repeatable structure. Taking control and answering 3 key questions: who you are, why you're calling, and what you want. This is something I'll be covering in depth later on in the video, and it's that missing context that a lot of common sales enablement doesn't teach you to deliver. Also, very few players remain on the cold call field at this point. If you're still making cold calls, just know that you're a rare breed, and congratulations, because most people these days, most even SDRs and account executives, prefer to hide behind the comfort of email and social media like LinkedIn, where they don't have to take as direct or be ready to face direct rejection. Most people don't have the guts to cold call these days. I would estimate, I don't have any hard data, I would estimate that the typical prospect receives 100 emails for every 1 cold call they receive. And the reason why I estimate this is because in my role where I am, I get a lot of cold emails asking about people reaching out about CRM systems, things like that. I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've been cold called, and I've received hundreds of emails. There's not many people on the field. And just cold calling is hard to do. It's hard to get yourself to do it. It's hard to get good at it, and therefore valuable. Even beyond sales, generally things that are hard to do are the most valuable things. So if you want to future-proof yourself, I think a lot of the cold email LinkedIn stuff that's easily going to be able to get automated over time. Everyone's blasting out automated sequences. Cold calling is what's going to be left, something that's hard to automate, and it's a unique skill that they can't take away from you. So next, how do we overcome this fear of cold calling if it's something you deal with? It's certainly something that I dealt with for a long time, and I thought it was because I just wasn't motivated or other things similar to that, when in reality, what I learned is that the majority, if not all, of cold call anxiety for most people stems from not having a repeatable structure or a repeatable framework in place. It causes you to have to rewire your brain before every cold call because you're calling different people. You don't have a plan for when that prospect says hello. That's where every cold call starts. You end up being so concerned on these calls with what to say next. You're asking certain questions. You don't know how they're going to answer it. You're worried about what they're going to say. And you start thinking ahead, oh boy, their response is almost up. I got to say something after this. And you lose control of the cold call. Another mistake is you introduce too much variance into your cold calls. We're going to cover this in detail later, but essentially you cause your cold calls to go in so many different directions that you can't be prepared for. And another mistake, you call lists with too many different personas on them. So you'll have a list of people and you'll call a VP of sales, and then the next person you call is a digital marketer, and then the next person's a director of IT. Back to that point of now you got to rewire your brain for every cold call because you have to say something different to all of these different personas because they care about different things. So the most effective methods for overcoming cold call anxiety is having a repeatable framework that allows you to maintain control of the cold call. So you know what to do at every layer of the cold call and are prepared for every outcome. That's the value statement framework we'll be covering. Calling lists of contacts that have similar buying triggers. So either a list of people that all have the same job title, they work in the same department, they all work in the same industry or the same market segment or some combination of these, so that you're calling people who are all very similar or have homogeneous characteristics. Tracking your results and becoming a detached cold call machine. I think this is the best way to overcome anxiety because everything just becomes a data point. Even if it's a hard no, that's something, it's a data point you can log in your spreadsheet. If it's a yes, you can log that. You can track certain objections. And now you actually understand the why behind your results. What's demoralizing is when you go 2 weeks without results and you can't really understand what's been going wrong. This helps you do that. And then fourth, just understanding you'll never see or hear from any of these people who hang up on you ever again. If you get blown out on a call, you just got to get to the point where it's funny. It's part of the process. This is why we make the big bucks. This is why as at entry-level SDR positions sometimes, you can earn over 6 figures or close to that amount for an entry-level position. If we didn't have to deal with this stuff, then we'd just be customer service representatives and we wouldn't even be making half the money we're probably getting paid these days. So just know that it's this stuff that actually is the reason why you want to get into this role in the first place. Next, cold call, tonality, and confidence. So a lot of sales expressions are used out there. I don't always agree with all of them, but one is that tone is 90% of your success on cold calls. I think this is 1000% true, and it's probably more like 95%. Just know all it takes is a good enough script. Yes, we're going to work on our scripts and make our scripts as good and as effective as we can, but just know with the right tone and the right confidence, and you can make an average script work very well for yourself. So don't stress and agonize over every word you're saying, because a lot of times the prospects aren't even registering everything you're saying because you're coming at them a million miles an hour and you just interrupted their day again. They're thinking about something else. It's a lot of it's subconscious. Like, does this person sound confident, competent, like they've been here and done this before and could potentially be worth spending more time with? So the majority of your focus, yes, we need a good enough script in place. It needs to make sense and it needs to logically lead the prospect to the conclusion that it could be worth taking a meeting with us. But most of your focus should be on your delivery and rehearsing it so that it's muscle memory and flows off your tongue. So confidence comes to that point from repetition and experience. Literally just rehearsing your scripts 10 minutes a day so that it flows off your tongue and you get little things down, like little inflections, pauses. It helps you sound more natural because anytime you first put a script together, you're going to sound rehearsed and robotic. So it comes from repetition and experience, confidence, and then also having a repeatable structure so that you know what you're going to do on the cold call. It's all muscle memory. And then also just understand your value to prospects. Get rid of this idea that you're bothering people. This is something I see new reps. I definitely felt this way. I had imposter syndrome. I was calling into people, oftentimes executives that had 30 years of experience, and in my head, I'm like, I barely understand what my company even does or the value of my solution yet. How am I supposed to be valuable to someone like a VP of IT in their 50s? And you just have to understand that what you're doing here is positioning yourself as a valuable resource to them going forward. All of these, well, let's take a step back. If your company has a position in the marketplace, it's because it delivers real value to customers. Most companies go out of business. It's like 95%. So just the fact that your company is in the marketplace hiring SDRs means it has a valuable solution and can be very valuable to the people that you're calling. And really what we're doing here is positioning ourselves as a valuable resource going forward. We don't need to sell the whole value of our solution on a cold call. These people have priorities and pain points that they need to be working on. There's a million people reaching out to them. They don't even know where to get started half the time. You're cutting through the noise and saying, here I am. You're putting it on a silver platter. Here I am. Here are the priorities and challenges I work on that are very relevant to you. I'd like to introduce you to my team. We've worked with tons of people like you in your industry, and we'd like to discuss how we've done so with you. And to a lot of people, that's very valuable. They have internal meetings, and they just generally don't have anyone to reach out to or know where to go. You're cutting through that. The highest impact methods to master your tonality and confidence. These are the quickest ROI areas I can give anyone that's trying to become more effective on the phones. There's a lot of things you can work on. You don't always want to change everything at once. You want to take them one at a time. These are the first one at a time things you want to focus on. One is replacing all passive language with stronger, more assumptive language. So a lot of what passive language sounds like, it's most common when it comes time to ask for the meeting. Because you don't have that internal confidence, you put little caveats like, if you're interested, I'd love to set up some time next week if you're free. It usually starts with if you're interested, if you're open to it. It doesn't sound assumptive. So just by replacing that, instead of if you're interested, I'd love to set up some time, replacing it with, yeah, I'm looking to set up some time next week just to get introduced and aligned with your priorities going forward. How's your calendar look on Wednesday or Thursday? It's more, I'm looking to set some time, or let's set some time. The underlying assumption in the language is that this meeting is implied, not asking if they're interested or open to it. This small tweak can dramatically improve your results. And on top of that, replacing an upward inflecting tone with a stronger, more downward inflecting tone. Usually these two go hand in hand. When you're using passive language, you use an upward inflecting tone. If you're interested, I'd love to set up some time next week if you're free. And it sounds with an upward inflection where you more want to have that downward inflection. Great, yeah, I'm looking to set some time this week just to get introduced and align with your priorities going forward. Has that downward inflection. Those two things together are the quickest ROI to getting more effective on the phones. And then you want to strike the right balance. This is with your overall cold call script of being concise, measured, and most importantly, natural, aka you want to sound human. And this is to that repetition and practice point. That's how you do it. A lot of people, we're going to cover value statements and how you can create them. When they first start delivering them, when you listen, you can almost hear them reading it, or you can just sense that they're delivering a pre-prepared script. And it's totally fine to read. I still read scripts to this day. You just have to not sound like you're reading. So you have to take natural pauses and things like that, almost sound like you're thinking sometimes. Again, I'm going to show you some examples later in this video, but sounding natural and sounding human, sounding like you're personally reaching out to them and not just another sales rep. Avoid all gimmicky, markety language, things like that. Anything that can set off alarm bells in the prospect's head, because a lot of this is subconscious. So those are by far the highest impact areas when it comes to cold call tonality and confidence. All right, now we're going to get into building lists. This is so important. This comes before you ever pick up the phone. A lot of this comes down to how effectively you set yourself up so that when you wake up each day, you know what to do rather than having to come up with what to do. Because once you're good on the phones, the next step is being able to make more dials. It's cool if you become good on the phones, but if you can only make $20 a day, that's nowhere near as good as if you can be equally as effective but make $80 a day or $100 a day. And that's what coiling the spring is for. So the first thing you want to do is reverse engineer what you normally need to do in order to make cold calls. Just think about it. Typically, you sit down, it's 8 a.m., you got to start your day, or you think, all right, I got to pick some specific accounts to go after or specific leads to contact. Then I got to add them to a list in my CRM system. Then I generally have to think of a talk track that I'm going to say to them, which could change if they all have a bunch of different job titles and personas. Then in between calls, I have to pull up their LinkedIn or their company website in order to personalize the call and make it more targeted. And all of this creates daily friction and impacts both your productivity and your motivation, because when it's hard to make cold calls, it decreases your motivation levels too. So this is what slows you down, because oftentimes there's distractions. If you work in an office, you could sit down, you start working on your list, your first call's at 10:30, you're like, oh, I got plenty of time. Someone comes over, talks to you for a little bit, then you gotta go get coffee, then your manager asks you to do something. Next thing you know, it's 9:47 and you haven't even finished your list yet. You have less than 45 minutes till you have to take your first meeting, and it totally disrupts your flow. So question, why not just take all the time to complete these activities for yourself up front? It's like meal prep if you've ever followed a workout plan. It's more efficient. Yes, it takes a little upfront time. You spend 3 hours on Sunday, but then you have all your meals laid out for the entire week so that you can just focus on execution. It's the same thing in cold calling. You want to wake up knowing what you will be doing each day, knowing what list you're going to target, having the associated scripts ready to go, rather than having to come up with what to do. So the first and most important way to do this is create lists that fit your ICPs, your key ICPs, and or buying triggers. So what are your top job titles? What departments do they work in? What industries are they in? Market segments, like are they above a certain revenue threshold or below? Is it a certain employee count? Whatever buying triggers your solution that you sell has value for, you want to identify those and create your ideal ICPs and build as many of these as you can over time, but start with the most important ones, like the top 5. And really, to do this, you need 3 simple capabilities. I know there's a lot of CRM tools out there. I get asked about this a lot, but break it down. You really need to do 3 things. You need to be able to filter leads by things like job title or department, industry. It could be geography. Once you have them filtered, you need to click a button and be able to add them to a list. And then you need to be able to contact them one by one via the phone. Lots of tools out there to do this, but those are the three key things you need to be able to do. So some examples, if you sell a marketing automation platform where you might call both marketing personas and sales personas, you could just have a list of VPs of marketing in my territory or VPs of marketing in retail. And now we're going to make a similar script to VPs of marketing, but just slightly tweak it to be more targeted to retail priorities. It could be a different title, digital marketers in banking, or VPs of sales. If I'm sure a lot of marketing automation platforms, sales is another common persona. And building out all of these key ICPs, getting massive lists ready for yourself, because then we're going to get into making scripts that are targeted for all of those lists so that we can go down one by one and basically say the same thing to all of them, knowing it's going to be a very relevant targeted script for them. So now we can create a repeatable script that's going to be highly targeted for each of these lists. So let's get into how to do that using the value statement framework. So the value statement framework is designed with the following principles and beliefs in mind. These are some of the differences I have with the common sales enablement training out there. One is that the burden of proof when we make a cold call and interrupt someone's day, the burden of proof is on us as the cold caller to deliver value first before we ask anything in return. And typically what we ask in return too early are for their time and for them to answer a bunch of questions that we have before we've given them enough context. So in the beginning, we will be taking control and doing most, if not all, of the talking for the first 30 to 45 seconds of the call. And we're going to answer 3 questions in those 30 to 45 seconds. Who we are, why we are calling them specifically, and what we want, which is generally time on our calendar. We're going to state our intent. We're focused on selling time. We're selling the meeting. Again, we're not selling our entire value proposition. We're not running a discovery call and doing all this qualifying. You can do a little bit of that, but we're not doing 10 minutes of that. The purpose for our call is we have identified a key ICP. We know we can potentially be a big value add for them, and we would like to set up a meeting either for ourselves or our account executive, whoever it is, in order to discuss this further. We don't need to sell the whole value of the solution. We're going to position ourselves as a valuable resource to them moving forward in the key business areas that we know the prospect is likely to care about. So before we get into it, some other goals of the value statement framework is designed to give you control over the cold call process and for you to be prepared at every layer of the cold call. So if there's objections, how to handle those, when to expect them, things like that. So it's not just this random process where you're asking questions, hoping they sound interested enough to the point where you could go for the meeting. That's not a scalable process. It's designed for you to be targeted at scale. One value statement that we create should work for a large list of leads we plan to contact. Again, VPs of marketing that work in the retail industry. We can create one script that's targeted for that specific thing, and it's going to sound very targeted to most of them, very likely. It's designed to take key nuances of cold calling into account that common sales enablement doesn't, like that we're generally interrupting a busy working professional, and that if we create too much variance at the cold call, they're probably going to give us a defensive tone and try and hang up. So we want to take control, hijack them so that they don't go into fight or flight mode, and let them know early on who we are, why we're calling, what we want. We sound confident, competent, like we've been here and done this before, and they're a lot more likely to receive that well. And they're going to appreciate it whether they like it or not, that you were just straight to the point. Even though we interrupted their day, we don't need to ask permission. And then the value statements are designed to give you multiple shots on net or probabilities of booking the meeting. So this is a key nuance I think a lot of common scripts overlook, is that every cold call is a % chance that we book a meeting and therefore generate a qualified opportunity. So I want to design these scripts around selling time and give ourselves multiple chances or multiple probabilities of booking the meeting. And then our goal is to increase those probabilities as we become more skilled, we work on our tone, we tweak our value statements to be more targeted, etc. So let's get in and start with cold call openers for the value statement framework. My goal is to deliver what I call an assumptive formality. Remember, one of our key stated goals of the value statement framework is to maintain control and limit all opportunities for variance. So essentially the goal here is to get a quick formality or / response from the prospect, whatever it is, good, how are you, what is this regarding, and then get right into the value statement and take control. And it can sound like, good, thanks, yeah, the reason I'm calling is, or I'm just reaching out because, and then we're going to tell them who we are, why we're calling, what we want. But we want to signal to them in that opening with our tonality that we're not here to waste time. We have something to say next and we're going to get right into it. And the key to doing that is a downward inflection. So some common techniques that inadvertently cause this term I keep using, variance, that I hear is one, and I made all these mistakes. One, confirming their name and title. Like, hi, am I speaking with John Smith, the CFO at blank company, or something like that? This causes fight or flight mode. Now they know, oh, this is a stranger. I wasn't expecting this call. Just think about, like, play that in your head. Hi, am I speaking with Connor Murray? I'd be like pretty guarded. I'd be like, what bill did I forget to pay or something like that? Like, I'd get pretty nervous. So you don't need to confirm because you're going to learn anyway whether it's the right person. If it's the complete wrong person, they'll stop you. So I get the intent. You don't want to waste your or their time, but you're going to learn within 10 seconds anyway. So don't create that opportunity for variance. Asking permission. So I'll put a little star here. This doesn't always create variance, but in the way that most people deliver it, it does. So it can be like things like, hey, did I catch you at a bad time here? Or, hey, do you have 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? Then you can decide whether you want to continue the conversation. Usually when it has that upward inflecting tone, you're kind of signaling that you're going to be here a while, and you more want to signal that you're here not to waste time and you're going to get right into it. Or just doing too much in general, like, you're going to hate me, this is a cold call. All of this, you don't know how they're going to respond to this, and it just makes it harder for you to get right into why you're calling and delivering the actual value statement. So I'll do a few examples here. Maybe you'll be able to see the difference. So to this day, I just say, how are you, or how have you been? But notice the downward inflection. Hey, Jim, this is Connor Murray calling from XYZ company. How have you been? So I sound what I call professionally enthusiastic, but now listen to, we'll do number 2, same thing with an upward inflection. Hey, Jim, this is Connor Murray calling from XYZ company. How have you been? It's the same words, but the first one signals I have something to say next and that this is a formality. The second one sort of signals to the prospect, and again, a lot of this is subconscious, like, I've been good. Who is this? I have a meeting in 2 minutes. I don't have, how long is this conversation going to go? That's why you start to get these defensive tones. Hey, Jim, this is Connor Murray calling from XYZ company. How are you? It's a downward inflection. Hey, Jim, this is Connor calling from XYZ company. How are you today? Same thing, but the upward inflection signals to the prospect you might be here a while. So for example 3 and 4, I'll use the permission-based opener. I know I'm hard on it sometimes, but a lot of people are able to deliver it confidently as a downward inflection. So here's what an upward inflecting permission-based opener sounds like. Hey Jim, this is Connor Murray calling from XYZ company. Do you have 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling, and then you can decide whether you want to continue the conversation? And then the downward inflection of that would be, hey Jim, it's Connor Murray calling from XYZ company. Do you have 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling, and then you can decide whether you want to continue the conversation? It wouldn't be my preferred choice of opener, but you can see how it was the same permission-based opener, but you want to signal with that downward inflection that you expect and are ready to tell them something after this, and you're going to be concise and to the point. What you don't want to signal is that upward inflection that you might be here a while, and this comes with practice. You can literally measure yourself in your pitch rate, how often you're able to get past the opening, because I don't want the opening to be this big thing you have to concern yourself with. Ideally, it goes the same way every single time. Most of the responses I get are along the lines of, good, how are you? It could be, good. What is this regarding? Good. What is this regarding? Sorry, I don't have your number. I'd say, good. Yeah, I'm just reaching out because, and just get right into it. Whatever they take or whatever they give you, you just want to take it and get right into it. So now, what a lot of you probably came here for, how to create a cold call script designed to follow all of these principles. Once we get the assumptive formality and we get right in, the reason I'm calling is, or that I'm just reaching out because, now we answer who we are, why we're calling, what we want, and ideally we're targeting about a 30-second delivery. So breaking these down, the who you are is very simple. It's generally just one line. Tell them your name, the company you work for, and your title or your role that's relevant to them. 2, the why you're calling. This is the most important piece. It's the value of why you're reaching out to them. It's the value part of the value statement, where you essentially answer 2 questions. What priorities and pain points do you solve that are relevant to them? And at a high level, how do you solve them? And then the third piece is what you want, which is generally time on their calendar. So I'll run through an example here. In this example, I'm selling soft financial applications to finance personas that work specifically in the insurance industry. So I bolded all the areas I changed, knowing that this is a finance persona in insurance. But if I was calling a VP of HR in banking, I could replace everything I've bolded in parentheses while keeping the structure the same, that repeatable structure. But instead of naming finance priorities, I'll name HR priorities and say I'm part of the HR applications team. If it's sales and marketing, you could say I'm part of the sales automation team or the marketing automation team, etc. So here's an example. Assumptive formality to start. Hey Jim, this is Connor Murray, call from XYZ company. How have you been? Good. I'm just reaching out because I'm part of the financial applications team here that works with insurance organizations on priorities related to claims analysis, fraud detection, and risk assessment, usually by working with clients to implement BI capabilities that segment customers and analyze claims in real time, and then also to create customizable dashboards that are interactive and made for self-service reporting. And I know that's high level, but I'll be your main point of contact here for any priorities you do have in these areas going forward, resources you may need, anything like that. And I know I kind of called you out of the blue here too, so I was actually more looking to set some time later this week just to get introduced and align with your priorities going forward. How's your calendar look on Wednesday or Thursday this week? So let's break this down. It started with the assumptive formality, and then that first sentence was simply who I am. I'm reaching out because I'm part of, in this case, the financial applications team that works with insurance organizations. That's who I am. That's enough for me to sound relevant to them. Then the first sentence here, these are the priorities or pain points that I solve. I work on priorities related to, and I named insurance-specific priorities I know are likely to be relevant to this person. Claims analysis, fraud detection, and risk assessment. And then part 2, at a high level, how we solve them, implementing BI capabilities that segment customers and analyze claims in real time, and also to create customizable dashboards that are interactive and made for self-service reporting. Then I finish with the sentence, it's a little bit optional, positioning myself as a high-level resource for them for any priorities they do have in these areas going forward, resources they may need, anything like that. And then this last piece was the what, time on their calendar. Now I have answered those 3 questions, who I am, why I'm calling, what I want. A lot of questions, or maybe it's a question you're thinking, that it sounds like a lot. Yes, it is, but this is the point. This is a real pattern interrupt. Most people don't call and just take initiative and take control. Most cold callers call and they ask a series of open-ended questions that make the prospect roll their eyes and are like, oh, another one of these. You sound different when you do this, and it's not as long as you think. It's about 30 seconds, and I promise you, when you're concise and you sound confident and what you're saying sounds highly relevant to them, they will listen. Most of the time, yeah, sometimes occasionally you get people that will hang up on you in the middle. That's totally fine. Most people otherwise subconsciously appreciate that you didn't do the typical dance back and forth. You have 30 seconds, blah, 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 question, wondering how long this is going to take. You got right to the point, said a whole bunch of things that sounded relevant to them. You're positioning yourself as a resource going forward, and you're giving them an out. You understand they're a busy working professional and that they might not have time for a 5 to 10 minute call right now, so that if that's the case, we can actually do this later, and that's why I was actually reaching out. So I'm sure a lot of you sell a whole variety of different solutions. This framework works not even just, this is a tech sales example, this works in real estate, financial advisors, solar sales, auto sales, you name it. These are repeatable principles that work regardless of industry and market segment. Getting to the point, taking control, that confident downward inflecting tone. This is what works. So you can take what I put in parentheses here and make it relevant to your solutions and the types of personas you reach out to. And ideally, you build as many of these out as possible so that you have finance personas in banking, finance personas in wealth management, finance personas in retail, and then you can get to the specific title level, CFOs in insurance, VPs of FP&A in insurance, controllers in banking, etc., so that you can follow this repeatable structure. And you have, in this case, you could have 100 finance personas that work in insurance, probably say the same thing to all of them, and you can be very confident that it's going to be a highly relevant targeted script for them. And no, you don't need to pull up their LinkedIn. You don't need to go on their company website and research a whole bunch of priorities so that you sound confident or sound more targeted on the cold call. Let the confidence do the talking. It's all in the delivery. And when you first put these together, yeah, it usually takes a little practice. I know when I started using this framework, I was a little rusty. I sounded scripted, but I could feel with this structure that the calls I was making were being better received, and that if I just kept making a few more tweaks, I'd eventually get there, and I did. So take this framework, and then what comes next is how you can optimize this cold call process so that, again, the goal is to not have to do a bunch of research so that it's hard to make $20 or $30 a day. We want to get up to that 80, 100 level because we're able to just press dial, not overthink in between each contact. So from my observation, and I was in this boat, most sales reps do nowhere near enough volume. I see a lot of 25 to 40 dials a day, and I tell people it's not because you're not working hard. I don't want to be like finger waggy, hey, you just got to work harder, work longer, show up early, make more dials. It's genuinely because you're not structuring your day to be more efficient. A lot of times the people making 30 dials a day are actually working way harder than the people making 100 dials a day, but it's because they're doing all of that research in between every cold call and they're just making the process too hard on themselves. So 80% of the battle is that coiling the spring process we covered and having your lists and your scripts ready to go for yourself. Your key ICPs like finance personas, insurance, the one we just did, so that when I sat down that day, I had 100 people of finance personas in insurance and I had that script ready to go, and it took me 0 minutes to get going. I can just start clicking dial. It's also understanding, like I said, you don't need to do research before every call to book a meeting. I've seen it play out. It's absolutely not necessary to pull up their LinkedIn or their company in order to be effective on the phones and set meetings. Just understand that. This is the point you got to get to where you can just dial, 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 dial. So I see a lot of reps go from making $30 a day to $100 a day implementing this framework, and it actually takes them less time. So, and it's not like volume cures everything, but it cures a lot. So volume helps, this is one of the most important points. Volume helps you ride out variance in answer rates and set rates. Anyone who's made cold calls for a while knows when it's hot, and when it's cold, it's cold. You'll go 50 dials without a single answer, and then the next 15 dials you make, 10 people answer. But if had you just only made 40 or 50 dials, it would have been a total wasted day. You would have gotten no feedback, no skill development, nothing to measure. When you're making upwards of even 70 is really good, but ideally you can get to that 80 to 100 range. You are it is unlikely you will get no answers. You will at least get some feedback. So it helps you ride out variance in answers and set rates, because beyond just answer rates, a lot of times it's just cold with prospects. You can go a week without booking a meeting, and then you find that one account where you book 6 meetings within the account, and it just gets you right back to your average. So you also accelerate your skill development. You get way better at cold calling way faster when you're making more dials and getting more repetitions and answers and prospects you talk to. And then I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but it majorly boosts your brand. A lot of you are SDRs at corporations. Your end goal is to get to an SMB account executive role and eventually to an enterprise role. When you're able to make $100 a day consistently, that's special. Most people are not doing that. And a lot of the managers, they see your name at the top of the list like, wow, how are they doing this? Let's have them teach other reps who are struggling to make more than 30 what their process is here. It's a major brand booster. And in the worst case scenario, I know that it's been a little bit of a rough job market out there. It offers a lot of protection if maybe the results aren't there yet, but you can point to the fact that you're doing the right things every day and making 100 dials. There's really no downsides to it and all upside. It's just putting in a process so that you can easily do it. And just lastly on this point, just think about how long does it take to actually make $100. I think a lot of people overestimate this. From what I've found, if you're making 100 dials, on the low end, the average amount of time a dial takes is 1 minute, and on the high end, it's 3 minutes. And the reason is because that counts dials that go straight to voicemail or aren't answers, that are like 5 seconds long. So that brings down the average, and then yeah, you might have some lives that go 5 minutes long. But what I've found is if it's only a minute, hopefully it's not, because that means probably not a lot of people were answering, but that's 100 minutes. That's like an hour and a half, close to 2 hours. And if it's more towards that 3-minute side, then it's 3 minutes, which is a little bit over 3 hours. So yeah, a lot of cold calling, but very doable in the SDR role if your day is not packed with meetings already. But the only way to do that is if you truly are just making dial after dial and not having to do research in between. If you're doing research in between on LinkedIn or their company website, that number turns into like 5 or 6 hours. So just understand that you don't need to do that, and you want to get to the point where you're able to consistently make, I like 100, but even 70 or 80 a day is really good. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the topic of objection handling. So let's say you deliver that value statement I did earlier. I positioned myself as a resource and asked for the meeting, and their first response is, no, we already have ABC. We have a different solution in place for this. The first line of defense is to what I call double down and sell the time. So don't get thrown off yet. Acknowledge whatever their concern is and tell them it makes sense to meet anyway. This is a repeatable framework, but it can sound different depending on the objection. So if they said, yeah, thanks for reaching out, we already have ABC solution in place for this, so I don't see why it would make sense to meet. Instead of immediately asking them, how's that system going for you? When do you implement it? Is there a renewal coming up? Do you have any priorities in the near future? I would say, got it. Yeah, that's actually why I was reaching out. We work with customers of ABC all the time, so if there's ever a fit, we can move ahead. But I still think it at least makes sense to briefly introduce you to my team, because we'll be the main ones supporting you for any future priorities you have in these areas going forward. So would later this week or early next week fit your schedule? So I'm not selling my solution yet. I'm doubling down on what I requested, which was the meeting. I'm doubling down and selling the time, because what I've found is a lot of prospects naturally will decline your first request to a meeting, even if they found what you said to be valuable, because they're just not wired to give out their time so freely. But if you double down confidently like this, a lot of people will then say yes. And you have an ideal customer profile that you're talking to ideally. So yeah, usually there's some questions after that, but you kind of naturally lead into booking the meeting from there. So that'll work sometimes. And again, this is a shot on net. It's not even going to work the majority of the time. It'll work a good amount as you get good at it and with your tone. But then this is what I mean about being prepared. That's your first line of defense. Whatever their objection is, double down and sell the time. And then be prepared and expecting for them to push back even further. And your second line of defense is to ask a targeted question to build credibility, or it can end up oftentimes being 2 or 3 targeted questions to build more credibility. Because if they're still on the phone with you at this point, they're signaling they have time to talk. This is a key distinction I have, is now is where you can open up the conversation because you've delivered value first. You've told them who you are, why you're calling, what you want. You've stated your intent. You doubled down and sold the time, and they're still on the phone with you, engaging with you. Now you have earned the right to open up the conversation and hopefully build a little more credibility for yourself, because that's what's lacking at this point. The math equation they're doing in their head is, does this person sound confident and competent enough that it won't be a waste of my time to set aside 30 more minutes to meet with them after this? And hopefully these targeted questions help flip that from a no to a yes. So they could respond, I doubled down, I sold the time. They'll say, okay, yeah, I'll write your name down, but we should be all set for a while. Feel free to reach back out in a few months though. I would say, okay, yeah, I'll definitely stay in contact, but quick question, when you say you already have ABC solution in place, does that support X, Y, and Z processes? And the reason I ask is because normally when we work with customers of ABC, there can be gaps in those areas filled by other solutions like blank and blank. And there's usually a big opportunity to consolidate the architecture onto a single system. So this is where we're starting to get a little more advanced, and this is stuff you want to pre-prepare depending on the title and even the objection. So if they say we already use a solution, that's where you want to be able to know, okay, how do you typically work with customers of that solution? You probably know, okay, that's a point solution that fills one specific gap, where my solution is more of a comprehensive platform solution. So you want to be able to call out and give more context. This is a key line, and the reason I ask, so don't just ask the question. This is where a lot of reps fall short. They'll just say, so when you already have ABC solution in place, does that support X and Y and Z processes? And that's not enough meat on the bone. That's where the prospects start to give you a defensive tone, because they don't know where you're going with this. So you want to give them the context. And the reason I ask is because, and if you say something like this, now you're signaling to them, you're giving them more evidence that you are someone who has been here and done this before, and it could be a good use of their time to spend 30 more minutes with you, potentially even bring on other team members and even stake their brand. The last thing they want to do is bring one of their peers to a call like this and have it be a total waste of their time. But when you say something like this, it signals to them, it builds a lot of credibility in their eyes. And one last point too is you want to engage with them a little bit here. They're signaling that they have some time to talk to you, but you still want to be pulling it back to a meeting. So hopefully now they're giving you a little bit more context, and you can say something like, got it, yeah. And that's why I reached out. This is what I think we should be covering on this next call, and naturally give yourself another shot on net, and do this as long as it takes. Sometimes it's one question, sometimes it's three, and sometimes you're not able to get it over the line, and that's fine. But that's how this framework is designed. As your first shot on net is that value statement where you proactively avoid a lot of objections and variance you otherwise would have faced. Then you double down and sell the time as your first line of defense, and then your second, third, fourth, or however long it takes, is a series of targeted questions where you're aiming to build more credibility, but still pulling it back to setting the meeting and selling the time, which is the purpose of your outreach. So again, this is what we cover in far more detail in Cold Call Mastery, where you can actually get your value statements, your scripts, your openers, everything reviewed in more hands-on guidance. So hope to see you in there. And with that, thank you very much for being here and for being a part of this video. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.